What's going on, everybody? JHow here, and in this Diablo 3 video we're going to cover a monk build, which is one of the best builds going right now, and there's actually a couple of variations that have been a little bit popular. I'm going to cover all the alternatives, or at least hint on some of them that you can run. I'm also going to cover the gear required to make this work and what will work with the alternative. Also cover everything you need to know in terms of the skill, the gear, and the synergy, the legendary gems and all that. So without further ado, let's get into the skills and see what makes this thing run. Alright, so first things first, your main attack is going to be your primary attack. Crippling Wave with Mangle. It's going to do a slow on their movement speed and attack speed, and it's also going to daze them with every third hit. It's just really good when you're in close and you're trying to deal damage. It's also going to work really well because area damage is going to be pretty key. I'm going to talk about how that works when we get to the gear section, but keep in mind that area damage is going to be kind of the main thing, and also cooldown reduction. We'll get to that here in just a moment. Then we look at Dashing Strike with Radiance. Now, this is going to be more fire damage. It's not necessarily going to be the main damage dealer, but this gives you good mobility. You're going to be going into the middle of mobs, and if you ever need to reposition, this is going to be key. This is going to work really well with your set bonus that we'll get into, but furthermore, the rune gives you 15% increased attack speed for 4 seconds. So using this at least every 4 seconds will give you that extra boost in attack speed, which means more heals, which means more damage. Overall, just a really great skill to use. Cyclone Strike with Implosion. To be able to pull in a lot of enemies is going to be key. I talked about how area damage is going to be one of your main focuses, and this is definitely going to be able to help. By pulling in more enemies, it means that you're going to do more area damage, and it also means you're going to clear greater rifts quicker. That's kind of important. Next up, Breath of Heaven infused with Light. To be able to get that additional spirit from spirit generating attacks is going to be the main point of this. It's also going to help obviously with the heal there and everything going on, and to be able to have this basically on 100% uptime is going to be your focus as well. To be able to have that spirit because of the gear that you're going to be using is going to be a big deal when we get to the gear, so we'll talk about that here in just a moment. Next up, Mantra of Salvation. To be able to have that increased resistance and the dodge is basically why you're picking this. To be able to activate this, I guess, as needed isn't too bad, and it does come into play every so often, but for the most part, the passive on this is pretty OP. Next up, Epiphany with Desert Shroud. Infusing yourself with sand, reducing damage taken by 50%. Obviously big. And then also to be able to increase your spirit regen is going to be another thing that's going to help out here. Now, this isn't 100% necessary, and there are a couple of options that you can go with in terms of some alternatives that you can use for abilities. Now, instead of running the basic one auto attack, the one primary attack, we've seen some builds that come out with basically a 2 primary auto attack style, and basically that revolves around being able to use 2 different primary attacks. One of them will amplify damage, so you use that for 3 attacks and then you switch back over. That's going with a different build, but we've also seen kind of this focus that's more around the fact that you can use Serenity with Ascension as opposed to using some of the other abilities out there like the Cyclone Strike. So you don't always have to use it, but for the most part, we're going to focus on this build in particular and why it's going to work, especially when we get to the gear to talk about the synergy, and that's kind of the bigger deal. Now, when it comes to the passives, Alacrity is going to be key because it's going to be able to give your spirit generators extra attack speed, and to be able to have that extra attack speed will make sense here in just a minute. Obviously, more damage is a good point right away. Harmony, be able to increase your single elemental resistances from your items. Obviously going to help with the toughness. You're going to be in the middle of a lot of stuff. As I said, you're pulling a lot of stuff on top of you. You need to be able to stay alive. Seize the Initiative, being able to do extra damage to those enemies when they first start, especially when you're at high greater rifts. Enemies above 75%, they're going to be there for at least longer when you talk about those high health pools. To be able to increase your attack speed will be key to being able to get through greater rifts. Also, Beacon of Etar. I talked about cooldown reduction being one of the main stats you're going to focus on. Being able to have extra 20% just right away with a passive, going to help out a lot. So without further ado, let's also get into the gear, because that is also going to be a big focus. And the big focus about this is your Shenlong set. Now, Shenlongs obviously is going to be the main thing. To be able to do more damage with your spirit generators by each point of spirit you have, that goes back to the point where we made with Breath of Heaven infused with light. To be able to get that extra spirit back, that's why you want to have this up at 100% uptime, to be able to make good use out of Shenlong. So that you can see right away. Now, one of the ways to make that happen, and almost 100% necessary to make that happen, is both on your Shenlongs, you need to have cooldown reduction on both weapons. Because you can get 10% cooldown reduction on your weapons, getting that on both is key. Now, having obviously the socket there is going to be a big priority, but having that cooldown reduction is good. Also, if you can get the dream of having the good damage, the good dexterity, and all that stuff, and the socket, the cooldown reduction, the next ability is area damage. To be able to have cooldown reduction, area damage, socket, and then everything else there with your dexterity would be a huge buff to what you're trying to do. Area damage is going to be a big deal with you doing damage, so if you can get that, great. But cooldown reduction is going to be priority, going back to the reason I just made about Breath of Heaven. So make sure you prioritize that. Another thing that you can prioritize is Lefebvre's soliloquy. Quite a mouthful there. Anyways, this right here is why you pick Cyclone Strike. Cyclone Strike reduces your damage taken by anywhere up to 50%, 40 to 50%. And so using this at least every 5 seconds to be able to pull enemies in, you're obviously going to be trying to control the enemies around you, bringing them in to be able to do that area damage, bring in more enemies. But this also is going to help you mitigate a lot of that damage coming in. Again, having dexterity, vitality, and then ideally cooldown reduction, and then area damage will help out. Again, you're going to see a trend here. Cooldown reduction and area damage, cooldown reduction being your #1 priority, so you have 100% uptime on Breath of Heaven, is first priority. Area damage is a close second. Also available is the bracers with spirit guards. This says your spirit generators reduce your damage taken by anywhere between 30 to 40% for 3 seconds. Now, since you're always going to be auto attacking with your spirit generators, it's not that big of a deal. So you're going to have this. We've seen some damage mitigation so far between a couple of the last few items, and also having fire damage rolled on this to couple with your fire damage from your primary ability is going to be your focus there after crit chance and with your dex and vitality. And for your belt, String of Ears, another damage mitigation item. Now, this one doesn't necessarily have the legendary affix, but it is there, right? And you have the reduced damage from melee attacks, and that's going to be the reason why you're running the String of Ears. To have that, to be able to reduce that melee damage, again, you're going to have a lot of enemies on top of you. Staying alive is a big priority in Greater Rifts. If you're dead, then you're not clearing Greater Rifts. So you're seeing synergy between damage that you're doing and mitigating damage, and that's, you know, the balance that you have to make when building your gear. When we look at the jewelry, the unity is going to be key in making this work. Having one on you and one on your follower to be able to split the damage. Again, more damage mitigation. Unity is really going to help that. When we look at the other ring, it's going to be the Endless Walk set. So you're going to need the amulet with the Traveler's Pledge to go along with the Compass Rose. While standing still, damage is dealt. It's going to be increased by up to 100%. So being able to pull enemies directly on top of you and then to stand still and just go to town, area damage, fast attacks, everything. Obviously, this is where your damage is going to start coming in. We're going to start seeing this start to ramp up as we look at the later part of the gear here. So having that with these sockets on there are going to be necessary for both of those items. And now when we look at the Raiment Set, this is obviously the main bread and butter. Your spirit generators for the 2-piece bonus have 25% increased attack speed and 100% increased damage. So right away, you see that extra damage. It pairs very well with Shenlongs to be able to have your spirit generators do that extra damage. And that's a great start. Your 4-piece Dashing Strike spins spirit, but refunds the charge when it does. Dashing Strike, we already know, obviously helps to be able to do a little bit of damage, but to be able to get that dodge chance after using Dashing Strike. And then we're going to also look at the 6-piece bonus. Your spirit generators increase the weapon damage of Dashing Strike to 12,500% for 6 seconds. That's not overly impactful because you're mainly going to be using your spirit generators to be able to do your damage. But the other side of this, Dashing Strike increases the damage of your spirit generators by 1,250% for 6 seconds. So to use your Dashing Strike at least once every 6 seconds, and you'll probably use it more often than that. But to be able to get in and out of danger with your spirit generator, you know you'll have that charge there. But to be able to amp your damage of your spirit generators at least every 6 seconds using Dashing Strike is where you're going to see big numbers start to come in. So making sure that you are cognizant of that to be able to use your Cyclone Strike, to be able to mitigate damage off of that with your shoulders. You can see synergy all around. If you stay on the move, that's fine, but using Dashing Strike as your movement, finding a place, a safe place, using Cyclone Strike, and then going to town with your area damage is going to be what really makes this build work, and that's where the synergy comes in. And speaking of synergy, we'll look at Kanai's Cube, because in the weapon, the Flying Dragon is going to be there. Chance to double your attack speed when attacking. And we already talked about doing damage is key with your spirit generators, and we'll talk about the legendary gems and why this comes in as well. So having the Flying Dragon, a big deal. For your armor, Depth Diggers. Primary skills that generate resource deal 100% additional damage. So your spirit generators, as you can see, now are going to be faster and they're going to hit harder. So the first part, we talked about a lot of damage mitigation with the items, but as we see in the later part here with the gear, the set bonus, you're now doing a ton more damage. And for the jewelry slot, Ring of Royal Grandeur. Now this just allows you to use the Lefebvre's shoulders. And so if you opt to go a full 6-piece bonus of raiment and you go away from the Cyclone Strike, or you just don't have this item available, then you can use the full 6-piece raiment and put a convention of elements in that slot to be able to amp your damage. Just remember that having those shoulders allow you to use Cyclone Strike and to mitigate damage by using it. Now again, I went over a couple of the alternatives. You don't have to use Cyclone Strike, but if you don't, then you won't use the shoulders and you'll go 6-piece and then you'll go with the convention. Now, when we talk about legendary gems, the number one choice, obviously, that we're going to see is Simplicity Strength. Increases the damage of primary skills the more you level that up. And then once you hit the level 25 legendary gem, hits with primary abilities heal you for 4% of your maximum health. Now, we talked about getting the extra attack speed with Flying Dragon. We talked about doing the extra damage as well. So, Simplicity Strength to be able to heal up with the faster primary skills, which are your spirit generators, is going to be why that legendary gem is so impactful. Also, the Bane of the Trapped. Bane of the Trapped increases damage against enemies under the effects of control impairing effects. Now, you're already pulling enemies on top of you, but the level 25 part of this, gain an aura that reduces the movement speed of enemies within 15 yards by 30%. It synergizes, obviously, with the first part of this to be able to do more damage to the enemies that are directly on top of you. Bane of the Trapped is way too good to pass up. The other legendary gem, Bane of the Stricken, each attack you make against an enemy increases the damage it takes from your attacks. You are attacking very fast, and at high greater risk, you will have to attack more to kill individual mobs. At lower ones, they'll get one shot or hit a lot quicker. But Bane of the Stricken at higher greater rifts is going to be an obvious clear-cut number one choice. And to be able to do the extra damage against bosses and Rift Guardians is going to help out as well when you do get to the end of the greater rift. So that's going to do it for this Diablo 3 Monk build guide. For the Shenlong's build, again, there are a couple of alternatives. We'll get into that more in future videos. So if you're looking for more Diablo content, be sure and subscribe. Also, be sure to check out these other videos as well. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. Till next time, happy hunting. See you again.